Maggie Moreno, and I am doing my critical pedagogy chapter on number 19, Standardization, Defensive Teaching, and the Problems of Control by Linda McNeil. In her article, she reports on a study that was conducted in Texas, where the purpose of the study was to analyze the ways that the structures and schooling can enhance educational quality. Teaching and learning were widely regarded to be authentic in a series of urban magnet schools in which students were predominantly minority, African American, and Latino. However, during the collection of all this data, the state enacted standardization policies meant to reform all of the schools, including these magnet schools. The quality of teaching and learning began to suffer as a result of these controls. McNeil concluded that standardization reduces the quality and the quantity of what is taught and learned in schools. In the short term, the imposition of standardized controls reduced the scope of quality of course content, diminished the role of teachers, and distanced students from active learning. In the long term, standardization creates inequities, widening the gap between the quality of education for poor and minority youth and that of more privileged students. The practice of teaching shifted away from intellectual activity toward dispensing packaged fragments of information that was sent from an upper level of bureaucracy. The role of students as contributors to classroom discourse, as thinkers, as people who brought in their own personal stories and their own personal experiences into the classroom, was silenced, and it's severely circumscribed by the need for the class to cover the specific curriculum that was given to the schools by the state. The argument for standardization is that low-performing schools would be brought up to standard, while the good schools would not have any negative effects. However, test scores are being used to make high-stakes decisions for students, such as promotion, graduation, retention, and placements. They're also used as measures of teacher and administrator performance and school quality. Administrators end up increasing their attention to managing students and teachers instead of supporting their instructional purpose. Teachers end up what McNeil calls teaching defensively. They ask very little from their students just to satisfy the requirements with as little resistance and with as few inefficiencies as possible. They use strategies to silence student questions and discussions. They omitted topics that they thought were difficult to understand or that invited student discussion, especially controversial topics. They also participated in defensive simplification, where students perceived that students had very little interest in a lesson or that it was going to be a difficult lesson that might cause students to resist the assignment. They made both the content of the assignment and the work the students had to do as simple as possible. Students found that school knowledge wasn't credible, that what they were learning was not going to be useful for them in the future. Students exerted the least amount of effort required to simply pass a class. Students are viewed as disruptive if they try to contribute opinions or start discussions. It ends up becoming a vicious cycle of lowering expectations. When teachers tightly controlled the curriculum, the students mentally disengaged. And when teachers saw that the students mentally disengaged, they started to tighten the controls even more. When administrators saw that the teachers and the students were exerting very little effort, they increased the controls. As a result, the school, for both teachers and students, began to lose its legitimacy as a place of serious learning. When standardization becomes institutionalized and student testing becomes to be used for monitoring accountability throughout a state's educational system, negative effects fall most heavily on the poorest children, minority children whose entire school experience comes to be dominated by an attempt to raise their test scores at any cost. Standardization, when it begins to shape a whole system, in effect creates a new system of discrimination. In the following videos that you're going to see, you will be getting the perspective of a high school student who is in the current system of standardization. And you will also see the opinion and perspective of a community member who is very involved in his community, who has done a lot of research and a lot of studies on the history of standardization as well as its effects.
My name is Jasmine Venegas, and I'm a senior at California High School.
Okay, so what role did standardization play in your education?
It doesn't really play a role. I think it's pretty useless, to be honest.
So, in what ways do you think it's detrimental to your education?
It doesn't really help. Um, I just learn how to memorize things and not be able to put them in real life situations, so I don't even memorize it unless I'm forced to.
Can you describe a time in which a teacher went off course in terms of standards and curriculum and focused on something more controversial?
In my AP government class, my teacher, to make us memorize things a lot, he'll apply them to worldwide news that recently comes out. A lot of them have been with the bombings, and he'll apply a lot of government stuff to that. And yeah.
Okay, do you find school knowledge to be credible, all encompassing, and why?
I find school knowledge to be credible because I trust that the school system is trying to actually help us learn. And I mean, I don't know the material myself, so if a teacher tells me, I can't say, oh, that's wrong, unless like I know it from a book by heart or something.
Do you think it's all encompassing? Does it cover everything you think you're going to need to know once you're out of school?
Unfortunately, no, I don't think it does. I mean, some stuff you won't even use when you get older, and a lot of things you learn by friends and at home to actually do stuff. School doesn't teach you everything you need to know in life, and a lot of it is, I guess, useless for when you get older because you're not going to use it. It may be like super important and you need to know it to pass high school or
Well, can you
stuff.
give me an example? Something that you probably wouldn't use?
Um, a lot of math that I learned I probably won't use. I don't want to be a math teacher. I don't want to be a scientist. I don't want to build rocket ships or stuff like that. Um, but a lot of stuff I learned in government probably will help me because I want to be a lawyer. So I need to know the law. I need to know how the country works and systems and checks and balances. But with math, probably not unless I'm going to become a tax lawyer, which I don't plan to.
Okay, so what do you think would have made your own educational experience more valuable?
I think my educational experience would be more valuable if teachers would apply a lot of the curriculum to everyday life and would be able to teach kind of, I guess, what they wanted to. It's still based on what they're supposed to teach, but I mean, when sometimes my teacher doesn't always go by what he or she is supposed to teach and kind of goes off, but does find a way to tie it in and imply it, it sticks in your head more, especially if it's a dramatic story that they had or a really funny one or something like that.
What's your personal opinion on Common Core standards?
Personally, I didn't get the Common Core. I thought it was really hard, especially because it's on the computer, and I just find paper a lot easier. And the questions, um, they seemed pretty easy and not difficult or challenging. And then some of them were really confusing, like it was just repeating what the other question was. And I didn't really know how to work it. Like I didn't know if it was just like super confusing, I guess, because I'm not a whole digital type of person or technology type of person. And on paper, it probably would have been a lot easier because the words are right there. And I guess because it's a newer kind of test for me, and it just I don't know. It just seems something more difficult because of technology based world that we live in.
Okay, so if there was one thing you could change about the current educational system that would have helped you in your own education, what would you change?
this whole deal with censoring, um, a lot of teachers have to censor what they say or give a trigger warning, especially in classes like English. And a lot of the things they can't say because it might be offensive to a student or it might hurt the student's feelings when really it's not a big deal, or issues that we need to talk about that are big deals and yeah, they hurt people, but the teacher can't talk about it because it might offend a student. But it really is a big deal that everyone should know about. And it's not being used in a way to actually hurt someone, it's being used in a way to educate us so we know what's going on in the world around us, because sometimes we don't learn about it at home or our parents don't know or something, and a lot of teachers know what's going on around them, and I think that would help a lot if there wasn't so much censoring going on.
Okay.
Okay. Hi,
Hi. Your name?
my name is Oscar Romero, and I went through the public education system from first grade to um, to the 12th, and then I did some college. Well, the, from what I've been understanding from the history of standardization is that um, the purpose, the stated purpose, is to elevate the quality of the education system, um, and to provide equality. Um, Maybe not equality, but equity. Equity, and meaning that everybody has a fair chance to learn, to be educated, to raise their socioeconomic status. But I think that standardization over time has become less about equity and more about equality, where everybody becomes the same, where a diversity isn't respected as much as before, but now, um, over time, standards have been implemented more from the top down, meaning from the state government and then from the federal government. Um, I feel like it's been more about equality, less and less about equity, and so I think that's very controversial. I think that's something that's controversial and why there's so much backlash. I noticed that when I was in high school, some of my teachers, they were passionate about what they wanted to teach, but when after the bell rung and the class was over, they would sort of vent out a little bit more about what their passion was, and but during class time it was just very it was following the standard, following the curriculum, um, and so my education experience was very uneventful. As a consequence, I feel like my teachers, I think that they were a little bit tied down, and I think they lacked motivation, but because not so much because they lacked motivation as much as maybe the standards tied their hands. I've been looking into the subject for a while. I've been looking into the subject for maybe about a year now, and some of the complaints that I've been reading about and listening to are that teachers are their resources, their time, and their energies are being focused on these high stakes standard exams, and so it used to be that before. I believe that it was before, during the No Child Left Behind era. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there used to be six exams that we would take, six major government exams that we would take. It would be like two in elementary, two in middle school, and two in high school. But then now, I think with Common Core, it's now up to like 14. And so teachers students have to prepare for about 14 exams today. And so what I'm hearing, some of the complaints of the teachers is that like the preparation for these exams is taking over class time, over weeks, and sometimes up to a month of of their of their class time to prepare for these exams. And so these exams seem to be consuming the time and energy of the classroom. Yeah. So schools, right? The purpose of schools obviously is to give us information, to process that information, to apply that information, so that we can be productive members of society. We can produce things with the knowledge that we've acquired. And I felt like I had to wait until after I got out of school in order to gain those skills. I felt like after I graduated from high school or college helped me. College is a bit different, but during my time in public education, I remember when I graduated, I felt like I didn't know anything, because I didn't know anything about socializing with people. I didn't know how to handle myself in the job market. I didn't know anything about finances. I didn't. I just felt like I didn't. School didn't teach. School was more about doing well on getting grades, turning in homework, doing well on paperwork, doing well on exams. But when I graduated, those skills to me were obsolete and useless. And so I had to learn that outside of the school system. As young people within the public school system, we were very uninterested. Um, and we had a very cynical view about what we were learning. Um, but we didn't know any. I felt like we were doing what we had to do, and we didn't know any better. I tried to get good grades. I did my homework. I did everything that. But everybody had a very cynical view of school in a way, and so there was a lot of, we had to force ourselves to for school to catch our attention, or to feel like it was useful or interesting. A lot of times we had to force ourselves, or to just accept that we had to do well in school, so that we could attain that promise of a better life. So I just don't feel like the public education system did a very was very ineffective, to create that curiosity in what we were learning. So there's a place for standardized testing, and we can't do without them, because we do need them. There's got to be a measurable way to figure out how well our students and teachers and administrators are doing. But at the same time, standardized testing cannot give us the full and clear picture of what is really going on, whether a child is learning or not, whether a teacher is effective or not, because we're not machines, we're human beings. And a machine, you can, it's very objective. you know whether a machine is running well, you can measure things, you can look at it, and you can measure exactly how the machine is doing. But people are not shaped that way. There are many dimensions in a human that cannot be measured by standardized testing. So I think a problem has been that we have put so much emphasis on what the tests are demonstrating, but we're ignoring the fact that they're very limited. They cannot tell us the entire situation. So I'll give you a good example. The most popular international test that takes place is called PISA. It's an acronym for, I believe it's Program for International Standardized Assessment. I believe it's PISA. Anyway, they have these, I believe, every 3 years, and they standardize test 15-year-olds all over the world. And so when the results come in, it's blasted all over the media, everywhere, and all over the world. And so when these exams come in, and we as Americans expect to be at the top. because we're a rich country, we have a lot of technology, we're industrialized, and so forth, and we expect to be at the top, but we're not. We're a mediocre ranking, and so that's what the test is showing that just by looking at the data of what the test is shooting out, we have a very mediocre education system, and we're not doing well. Along with us is other countries, like Germany. Germany expects to be at the top, but they're not. They test according to those results. They're very mediocre. Now, the countries that are at the top are countries like Shanghai. It's not China, but it's Shanghai. They're the ones that are testing. They're the ones that are participating in PISA. And then there's South Korea, and then there's Finland, and those countries are testing at the very top. But they're testing at the very top, but when we look at the purpose of education, of what the education system should do, if we put it simply, it's to acquire knowledge, to process that knowledge, and to produce with that knowledge, to come up with something new, create something new with that knowledge, apply that knowledge. Registered patents, meaning when you invent something, new, you register it. You register a patent. Okay, well, China tests at the very top in PISA. They test at the very top. So according to the exams, their education system is producing the top people, the most intelligent people. They must be the most innovative. But they hold about, I don't know, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they hold 19% of the world's population. 19% of the world's population just in that country. But they're producing only 1% of registered patents. While, in contrast, the United States is a much smaller country, and it's at the top of producing producing inventions, innovating. We've been shooting out many good engineers, many good scientists, many good IT people. We export our technology everywhere. We export our technology everywhere. We export our culture because we are a very influential country, but yet we score very low. So really, when we really look at the reality, standardized tests are very limited in what is really going on. And so, yeah, standardized testing has a very limited, can tell us very little. And the problem is that we put so much emphasis, those that want to, change our education system, I believe, want to focus on what those standardized testings are demonstrating. But when we really look at the reality, we're not a mediocre. We have not been a mediocre country. I mean, we're still at the top. Historically, the education system in the United States has been decentralized, meaning that local communities had power over the education system. So local communities decided who to put on their school boards, and they influenced the superintendent, but it was, for the most part, very much a local issue, at least up until the 60s. During the 60s, there was a push for civil rights, right? And so they were pushing for civil rights and raising the standards of living and raising the education for everybody, and really trying to get equity and opportunity to all classes and all races. And so as a consequence, the state government, and more recently the federal government, has been implementing standards to provide equity for everybody. So that's the state. I believe that is the stated purpose to to raise everybody's standard of living, to provide more equity. Um, the education that made us a superpower. Our education system is more and more looking like the education systems of China and the USSR, and I mean, and what I'm saying is not conspiracy. It's just a fact. It just started to look like theirs because our education system has always been one of the most, if not the most, decentralized, where communities had control over their own education system. But increasingly, it has been the state that has taking the power away from the local community, and now the federal government has been taking more influence, and so the education system has been centralized, right? So right. I'm not very familiar with political activism. I'm not sure how the system would work or how we could change it, but I know that so long as the laws stay in place the way that they are, the teachers cannot change their situation. They have to follow the state curriculum. They have to follow the Common Core curriculum, and as long as those laws are in place, they are unable to teach what they were passionate about, what they were once passionate about. They have to follow the curriculum. So it has to be political change. It has to be a political change, and local communities have to gather. They have to advocate. They have to put pressure upon the school boards, and just figure out a way to push away the influence of the state and of the federal government to 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 regain that control that they once had. I volunteer at my local church, and I work with young people. I have my friends, I have family, and I think, and I just look at the youth today, and just from my perspective, I feel like um, young people today have a hard time socializing. They have a hard time um, being independent. They seem very withdrawn. They lack initiative. They they wait for people to tell them what to do. Um, and I'm concerned, and I know that the majority of our time is at home and is at school. And I believe that the way that the education system has been going, the trends has been a has been has had a big part to play as to why our youth are are just so they just seem to lack so much skills, social skills. Um, so yeah, I'm concerned about that, and so I wish that we would go back to the trends that we used to have prior to No Child Left Behind. I think that would be a step in the right direction. I think it'd be best for the country. Mhm.